Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Unfortunately, due to the current pandemic situation, most of us foreign Hujjaj could not perform Hajj this year. Inshallah, next year we will be able to do the benefit from this obligation. We would like to start this program with the Quran recitation by Brother Muntazir. Please welcome Brother Muntazir by reciting a loud salawat. Allahumma
اللهم
salli
صل
ala
على
Muhammad wa
محمد وعلى Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Inshallah, I'll be reciting verses 45 to 60 from Surah Al-Kahf. Overall, these verses echo the general theme of Surah Al-Kahf, which is, despite the world being created in an attractive and beautiful way, one shouldn't get consumed into it to the extent that they lose sight of the hereafter. So after having received guidance from the messengers in the form of Islam, we need to hold fast onto this message so that we can be successful on the Day of Judgment, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. واضرب لهم مثل الحياة الدنيا كماء إن أنزلناه من السماء فاختلط به نبات الأرض فأصبح حشيما تذروه الرياح وكان الله على كل شيء مقتدرا. المال والبنون زينة الحياة الدنيا والباقيات الصالحات خير عند ربك ثوابا وخير أملا. ويوم نسير الجبال وترى الأرض بارزة وحشرناهم فلم نغادر منهم أحدا وعرضوا على ربك صفا لقد جئتمونا كما خلقناكم أول مرة بل زعمتم أن لن نجعل لكم موعدا. ووضع الكتاب فترى المجرمين مشفقين مما فيه ويقولون يا ويلتنا ما لهذا الكتاب لا يغادر صغيرة ولا كبيرة إلا أحصاها ووجدوا ما عملوا حاضرا ولا يظلم ربك أحدا. وإذ قلنا للملائكة اسجدوا لآدم فسجدوا إلا إبليس كان من الجن ففسق عن أمر ربه أفتتخذونه وذريته أولياء من دوني وهم لكم عدو بئس للظالمين بدلا. ما أشهدتهم خلق السماوات والأرض ولا خلق أنفسهم وما كنت متخذ المضلين عضدا. ويوم يقول نادوا شركائي الذين زعمتم فدعوهم فلم يستجيبوا لهم وجعلنا بينهم موبقا. ورأى المجرمون النار فظنوا أنهم مواقعوها ولم يجدوا عنها مصرفا. ولقد صرفنا في هذا القرآن للناس من كل مثل وكان الإنسان أكثر شيء جدلا. وما منع الناس أن يؤمنوا إذ جاءهم الهدى ويستغفروا ربهم إلا أن تأتيهم سنة الأولين أو يأتيهم العذاب قبلا. وما نرسل المرسلين إلا مبشرين ومنذرين ويجادل الذين كفروا بالباطل ليدحضوا به الحق واتخذوا آياتي وما أنذروا هزوا. ومن أظلم ممن ذكر ليذكر بآيات ربه فأعرض عنها ونسي ما قدمت يداه إنا جعلنا على قلوبهم أكنة أن يفقهوه وفي آذانهم وقرا وإن تدعهم إلى الهدى فلن يهتدوا إذا أبدا وربك الغفور ذو الرحمة لو يؤاخذهم بما كسبوا لعجل لهم العذاب بل لهم موعد لن يجدوا من دونه موئلا وتلك القرى أهلكناهم لما ظلموا وجعلنا لمهلكهم موعدا صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Jazakallah, Brother Muntasir, for that mesmerizing recitation. May we all benefit from it, inshallah. Inshallah, the agenda for the program will include 3 short speeches from our respected scholars, and they are Sheikh Hussein Meki, Imam Sayyid Shoharwardi, Imam Abdul Alim Musa. We will also have 2 spoken words from our youth and a couple of short videos. Let us start the program with a spoken word by Brother Hussein Mujtahidi. Brother Hussein Mujtahidi is a student of Qom Seminary and has been writing spoken word poetry for many years. He was the winner of the spoken word competition during our last Imam Khomeini anniversary event. Please welcome Brother Hussein Mujtahidi with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وآله آل الله. When they come to you with discord, don't be a receiver. Whether they grow their beards or shave them, they are not but deceivers. The Lord's name they invoke while being combatant disbelievers. They circumambulate the idol house, their trek only gets steeper. Dig a trench if you must, but the enemy is on the inside. Sure, they wrote a deal, but they seek to divide. Throw stones at their statues, their plots won't subside. The mission either lives in you or from within you have died. You can never be safe when you close your eyes. Only for the simpleton is betrayal a surprise. The enemy is apparent and wears seldom a disguise. Be clear in your stance, death does not approach the wise. From time they have been trying to hijack religions and revolutions, destroying institutions, aggressive persecution, massacring erudites and students. They can kill our men, but our ideology will never fade, and our feet will never shake, because our inspiration and strength comes from those in their graves. Our armies are borderless, our ideology supreme. We do not rely on the material, victory descends from the unseen. The people are rising, resisting, defying. In death, our martyrs are alive and are thriving. Our struggle, international. Our heroes are omnipresent. Power belongs to the Lord. Your superpowers are peasants. Zakzaki in Nigeria, take Nimr in Arabia, spill the blood of our scholars. We will never fear ya, cause we aren't inferior and you aren't superior. I hope they can hear me in Iraq and in Syria, united as one, Sunni and Shia. When we stand together, they can never bury us. As long as there is air in my lungs and blood in my veins, we will never be silenced, neither by sanctions nor chains. They like to play their politics, but they're only politricks. Children became orphans, but their hearts are as hard as brick. They call it a war on terror, but it's nothing more than theater. Do these warmongers actually consider themselves leaders? Our march is eternal, and our hands are never empty. Whenever an idol emerges, an Ibrahim is always ready. Like Himmat and Hadi, we work without a trace. Like Zakzaki in prison, hardships we embrace. Our nationality is oneness. We don't tolerate multiplicity. One God, one movement, the talbiyah of unicity. We saw when the polytheists conspired from beyond, the believers dug a trench, drew their swords to respond. But what do we do when the toxic is at home? Qurayza cannot break our lines on their own. It's when our troops fight in different fronts that the battle becomes divided and one another we hunt. The enemy is still apparent, but discord seems invisible. The enemy is still apparent, but discord seems invisible, so hold on to the rope. Our army is indivisible. Our slogan is His Majesty, and our honor is His Prophet. On the mission we are steady like the son of Abu Talib. To be a follower of Wilaya is to make universal our brotherhood. To be a follower of Wilaya is to make universal our brotherhood. The disunited are defeated. This should be understood. Allahumma, we are here. To Allah we say labbaik. At your service, O our Lord, and to serve the Ahlul Bayt. First we will destroy the idols and the idolaters of Haramain. First we will destroy the idols and the idolaters of Haramain. Then we will pray in Al-Aqsa behind the son of Hussein. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على
Ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Jazakallah, Brother Hussein, for that spoken word recitation. It was both poetic and informative. May Allah always keep you in His favor. Next up, we have a speech by Sheikh Hussein Mekki. Sheikh Hussein Mekki is an African-American Shia scholar. His parents converted to Islam after the Islamic Revolution of Iran. He is originally from Philadelphia. Studied in the Hausa of Qom for about 10 years, he speaks Farsi, Dari, Classical Arabic, in addition to English. Currently a PhD student at the University of Denver studying education leadership, works with multiple centers, Islamic schools, and organizations throughout North America, is an executive director for non-profit Ahlul Bayt Assembly of America, does various translation work, and writes articles in leisure time. And in leisure time enjoys football, basketball, writing poetry, and travel. Please welcome Sheikh Hussein Mekki with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد والثناء لرب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me. I want to start by just mentioning that, the Hajj conference itself is it's just very interesting because as a child, this was one of the highlights for our family to go and visit, drive up to Canada from Philadelphia and to participate in the Hajj conference. Obviously, I was young, but my parents, may Allah bless them, made that opportunity and that effort for us to be able to participate and be a part of that. And I only have very good memories. And so it's an honor to be a part of this program here today. Alhamdulillah. I want to talk about Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, better known as Malcolm X, and in particular, what is one of the most important things that we can take from his life, especially focusing on his Hajj. Right now we're living in a climate where in North America, some people are just waking up to realizing that racism exists and social injustice is much more serious than some people realize. People get murdered, the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many other people whose names there's too many to mention. have been victims of oppression and zulm and injustice. On the other side of that, in reality, we know that Islam is the only true solution to the problems of the world, the panacea for the problems in the world. And we see that come full circle when we hear the words of what Malcolm X was saying, during his Hajj, before that, even so many of the things that he touched on. But I always want to bring back to what we can take from this, what we're going to learn from this. So many people love Malcolm. So many people right now are Muslim because of Malcolm. They love how he stood up to the bully. They love how he stood against oppressors. They love how he stood with the Mazlumin, with the oppressed people. He was a protector of them, a voice for the voiceless, for those who would otherwise society would have tried to silence. He was a voice for them. He was one who was on the forefront, like the Sabiqun. He led by his example. He practiced what he preached. He was humble. He was that shining black prince. But one of the things that people forget oftentimes, and what was possibly the most dangerous thing in the eyes of the enemies of Islam, was that Malcolm was constantly evolving, right? His progression, that was the greatest thing that they feared. If Malcolm X would have remained the Malcolm of prison, no one would have worried. The Malcolm early on, they would have been less worried. Even during his time as the main spokesperson for the nation, there was some worry. But that worry was mainly revolved around his progression and his evolution as a human being. So people think about all of the great things of what Malcolm X accomplished, and they forget to connect it to this piece, which was his evolution and his constant spiritual journey and progression, which enabled him to be able to accomplish these things. The letter that Malcolm X wrote back from Hajj is if there's an Islamic school, this is I would consider it obligatory for this to be a text for people to read and understand the society that we're living in, where we were and where we need to go. He talked about all of the spirituality that he saw, the brotherhood that he saw, the ukhuwah that he saw. One of the places where we are at in society as a community, and a lot of places, conversations are opening up around how do we build community? What do we need to do? What practically do we need to do? And I don't know that we are ready to hear the answer, because the answer revolves around doing exactly what Malcolm did. He considered Hajj to be the spiritual height. And you could see the difference in him. He considered what he's learned from that journey, what he shared back in that letter, when he talked about how Islam would be the solution to eradicate racism in America. This is exactly what we're talking about today. Again, the conversation hasn't completely changed. The time has changed a little bit. But what enabled Malcolm X to be able to see that reality, to be able to understand what is, despite his firm convictions, as he says so himself, that despite that, he was constantly looking for truth and evolving to whatever that is. I love this about Malcolm X. This is one of the most beautiful things that any human being can aspire to achieve, is to become a human being that is constantly evolving, constantly becoming better. He says, it forced me to rearrange my thought pattern, toss some things out. about what I thought about race. Now, you think about one of the number one reasons, the things that prevent us from moving forward and progress. It is this type of thinking, that bullheaded thinking, that I know the answer only thinking. My conclusions are the only right conclusions. My line of thinking is the only right thinking. And what happens as a result of that? We can't move forward. We can't learn from others. We can't even hear other people when they're talking. We already made up their mind that they're wrong and we're right. What is that? That is the ego. That is the nafs. Why was Shaheed Malcolm such a powerhouse? What did they fear? They feared that person who puts his foot on his own nafs, on his own ego, and continues to evolve as a process of that. So he sees truth here, he continues to evolve. Truth here, he continues to learn that. We're stuck. We are in a place where we know too much. Our truth is the only truth. We're not open to hearing from others. We don't care what scholars say, what other people say. We know best. There's nothing to make a human being more stagnant than a mentality that is blocked by himself. It does not allow his own progression. One of my favorite basketball players used to say that can't nobody stop me but me. That's how we are. What is going to prevent the community of Muslims moving together and working together to do to make those foundational and fundamental changes that are needed in society? Because we want to see fundamental change, but we don't want to do fundamental work. Because fundamental work starts with me. Fundamental work doesn't start outside. Fundamental work starts with me fixing myself, my ego. That is not something that I need to wait for who's going to come up with the plan. The plan is already there. The process in getting to that utopian society that inshallah that we get as close to that as we possibly can, it starts with ego. It starts with the nafs. It starts with ourselves. The reason why, think about the words that FBI used when talking about Malcolm X. He talked about on his journey of Hajj and when he left and went to several other countries on his way back. How there were multiple attempts on his life. What was it? What were they trying to kill? What were they trying to annihilate and murder? What was it? It was an individual who was a constant truth seeker, constantly evolving, no ceiling. And because of his progression, he could continue to lead people towards progression. Come on, you've seen those stagnant people, stagnant leaders. They have a mindset and a thought process and a myopic view. And no matter how many years go by, they're in the same space, the same perspective. They don't evolve. They don't learn society, issues, people. They're not consulting and they're not growing or moving forward. The FBI said, we are afraid of someone who might cause inspiration and guide people, who people might see as a black messiah, capable of galvanizing and inspiring. What type of person is capable of galvanizing and inspiring? The type of person who they themselves have been inspired. We don't think about revolution in here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the person who changes what? Everybody knows this. I won't change the condition of a people until they change what? They need to change themselves, their nafs, what's in their heart. Revolution begins with revolution. Foundational change begins with foundational change. Essential change. But these changes don't happen unless I'm able to see that, unless I'm able to want that. Malcolm was hungry. Hajj became like a summit of a peak of spirituality for him. He was humbled by the brotherhood. I think about always the hadith that says that in Hajj is where Imam Mahdi Ajjalullah Ta'ala Farajum Sharif, that he always is. And he sees us and we don't see him. But he's present there. There's so many hadith about the importance of Hajj always happening. So it's an unfortunate year, and obviously 2020 has been completely a very crazy year for many reasons. But it's a point where people from all over the world are constantly reminded that despite their different colors, despite their different issues, despite their different social status, the one God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is manifested in that moment in the unity of community. And you can't spell community without unity. And we see that effervescent and ever present when Muslims opt to take the road of Islam versus the road of ego. Now, that road of ego looks like different things. It may look like the racism that we see in the Muslim community sometimes. That's the ego. That I'm better than this person. My language is more important. You're not welcome here. All of these things. The injustices of society that we're looking at. But the path of Islam, what is that? That is a bond that cannot be broken. In the context of building community, there's a level that is the most basic level. Before you get to those great ideas and the grand ideas of what a government should look like, governance should look like, what infrastructure, what economic infrastructure should look like, what interpersonal relationships should look like, before you even can get to all of that, you have a foundational level. And that's the level of ukhuwah and brotherhood. So what are we doing about that? Because again, that path of ego is what leads people down a road where brothers don't speak to brothers. Families don't speak to their own family. Kinfolk are estranged. The best of friends and people and know each other are distant from one another. Little spats and issues and disputes become lifelong reasons for people to never associate with one another. Those are the people and the foundation of brotherhood. This is what the Imam is waiting for. How are we going to build that when it starts with building ourselves and our nafs? Malcolm said, I ate with people, slept on the same rug, drank from the same cup, of people who were of all different nationalities. The whiteness that has become synonymous with the social injustices that exist in in this land, in these countries, in so many countries. All of that can be combated with Islam. This was the belief of Malcolm X. You see that spiritual revolution that was happening to him once again on another level. He said, you know what? I found a greater vision of truth. I'm tossing out everything else that may have been problematic. I'm moving forward. I'm moving on another level. That is what we have to take from Malcolm X. That yearning for that moment of Hajj, that moment of spiritual purity and progression and constant development that only happens when we empty our heart of all of the other things that we have filled it with. I always tell people, I don't want to hear that you take your relationship advice from Dr. Phil or Dr. Pill or whatever other person. What does Islam say? You have Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. You have the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. You need to see what those people are saying. Everyone else needs to be held to that standard, not the other way around. Islam needs to be seen as the solution to the problems, not as the problem. If there's a problem, it's in Muslims not being synonymous with Islam. What Malcolm X saw in Hajj was an example of Muslims who were practitioners of Islam, because everywhere we see Muslim, we don't see Islam. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality. We look at a Muslim and we still see that same ego. We still see racism. We still see other isms. We still see injustice to other Muslim brothers and sisters. We still see greed. We still see doing things which are transgressions against Allah. Well, that's because that Muslim is not being a practitioner of Islam. Just being called Muslim doesn't make you a true Muslim. There's an idea that we all have this force and this power, and it is bil quwwa. It is a capability. It is the possibility. It is raw potential. Especially those young people. This is why we should invest in them. Even Malcolm, in his letter, he talked about those white college kids, the ones you see right now out here in the streets, protesting. That movement reaching this junction. That raw potential. Where in the hadith it says this is why you put emphasis on education and schooling the young people. Why? Because it says in hadith that this is like engraving on stone. Whereas trying to educate someone who's older, meaning someone who's set in their ways. It's not particularly a matter of age, but someone who becomes set in their ways where they are not allowing new information to enter. They are not wanting to hear about something different than what they've decided is right. This happens to people at all ages also. But that person, it says, is like trying to write on water. Bil quwwa, that potential, that raw potential. When it becomes bil fil, when it becomes actualized potential, that is when we will see progress. That is what made Malcolm the feared Black Messiah. We have to take that lesson from what Malcolm X, that path that he took his entire life, that pinnacle that was reached, especially during Hajj, during the pilgrimage, of the holiest of cities, where he talked about blessings beyond his wildest dreams. And some of that was mentioned, some of the things in his relation to the treatment of brotherhood and kindness that he would receive as someone who in America is just another black man, another neck to be kneeled upon, another potential victim. But what was it? He saw that that was Islam that forced a spiritual bond that was greater than anything else, greater than any skin color, greater than any other kind of connection that you might have with any other human being. I love what Malcolm X says. I want to just read this part where he talks about that it wasn't too difficult for me to undergo this changing of his opinion, a rearranging of his thoughts, despite my firm conviction and whatever I believe. I have always tried to keep an open mind, which is absolutely necessary to reflect the flexibility that must go hand in hand with anyone with intelligent quest for truth. That's a lifelong journey. So what is this work that people need to do? It needs to start here. The revolution needs to already be happening. How do I eradicate the sicknesses of my soul? How do I not allow my firm convictions to become obstacles to my progress? How do I keep checking my firm convictions with those Islamic injunctions? Otherwise, jealousy, ego, anger, greed, apathy, all of these things become obstacles which derail a person's individual spiritual progress. And then what happens to the community? It's a basic philosophy. A team is only as good as its players. Okay? A team is only as good as its best players, or all of the combination of those players. You can have a great team where every single person is playing their part. But if you have a team with one person that's doing their part, that's going to be hard to be successful. I mean, look at the history of the greatest people that lived. All of the stories that you read in the Quran are there for a reason, for our reflection. These great people, great prophets, and when people were following their ego, there was not much more that they could do. What did they say? You could lead the horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. So there becomes a part that has to be the work that everybody has to do individually. Then when each person is training individually, self-building individually, when you come together, then you are a powerful team. Then those group ideas, those communal ideas, those community ideas of change that need to happen are a reality and a possibility at that point. People talk about ideas that are putting the cart before the horse. A lot of the work, not everything has to be chronological in this way, but most of the work that has to be done for us right now is the work of the self. Unless we are saying that we are at a place of perfection, then we must be on that journey as Malcolm was towards perfection, that journey of progression. We have to seek Allah's help through this, His guidance to get there. There's not a person that achieves success without Allah's guidance and His will. It is a process. If we want to pick up the mantle where He left off, we should be the custodians of the house of God. We should be the forefront of all things social justice. We should be the ones at the very forefront of everything against oppression. But how can we legitimately do that if we are still doing oppression at home? You have people that are talking about doing da'wah and inviting people to Islam, but they won't even teach their own children about the Ahl al-Bayt. They don't talk to their families about the education in Islam. We're not educating ourselves. We want to educate others. There are poor people in the Muslim community which we are overlooking to go out and we want to eradicate world hunger. We are doing injustices in our own families and we want to go out and be the advocates of social justice. Malcolm practiced what he preached. Part of what the essence of Hajj is the essence of humility and tawadhu and humbleness. Stoning those shaitans is a part of our responsibility even today. Hajj is symbolic of a lifelong journey of things we have to constantly struggle with. Circumambulating the Kaaba means making Allah the center of our universe. Not, I want to listen to what He says, this person. What does Allah say? Unapologetic, uncompromising on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Between Safa and Marwa, we're running back and forth between how we deal with this struggle. Until we drink from that pureness, that pure water of Zamzam. I want to leave you with a thought about in surah number 91 in the Holy Quran. The sun, Shams. By the sun and her forenoon splendor, her light, by the moon that follows it, by the day when it's revealed, by the night which covers it, by the sky and He who built it, by the earth and He who spread it, by the soul, by the nafs and He who fashioned it, and inspired it with discernment, fujuraha wa taqwaha, its virtues, its ability to discern between right and wrong, or fall into the paths of wrong. All of these places in the Quran where Allah repeats over and over again these swears, which are done for the sake of emphasis, meaning that, when you want to emphasize something, I swear to God, wallahi, all of these over and over again is because Allah wants to drill home a very important point. What is that point? قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. Successful will be the person who purifies all of those sicknesses from their heart, who purifies their nafs, who purifies their soul. And everything that we want to achieve in terms of building the proper community, it starts with that purification. And that is not a small thing. Don't take it lightly. Do not take it lightly. That is a major investment in ourselves, in our children, in the future of our communities. Pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you all tawfiq in future years to be of those people who is present in Hajj, who is touching the black stone, standing and praying at Maqam al-Ibrahim, circumambulating the Kaaba, going through this spiritual progress in real time, leading up to that moment of future Hajj, of many future Hajjs for all of you, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you all more tawfiq and more success in this road. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide all of us and help us to be on that path and that journey of self-refinement, progression, and spirituality, which will lead to our success and preparation for the dhuhr of the Imam of our time, Imam Mahdi Ajjalullah Ta'ala Farajuhu al-Sharif. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah Sheikh for those words on Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, better known as Malcolm X, and his evolution in life. His control on his nafs and his ability to learn new truths and evolve every day is something that we should all emulate in our lives. And Sheikh, you are absolutely correct. Our worst enemy is ourselves and our ego. May Allah guide us on the path of perfection, inshallah. Next up, we have a short video clip from Imam Khomeini, Rizwanullah alayh, about the Hajj.
اگر مسلمین مطلع بشن که این بوقهای استعماری اونها را دارن از اسلام جدا میکنند و اسلام زدایی میکنند و محتوای اسلام را از اون چیزی که دارد خالی میکنند، من جمله مسئله امامت جمعه، در صدر اسلام مسائل سیاسی در مسجد و به وسیله اونهایی که امام جمعه بودند حل و فصل میشد و نقشه های جنگ در اونجا کشیده میشد و مع الاسف ما را رسوندند به اونجا که در خطبه های جمعه جز چند کلمه موعظه و تحذیر از این که نبادا در امور دخالت کنید چیزی نبوده است. یا نماز جمعه نبود یا اگر بود محتوا نداشت، یا حج را نمیگذاشتند برند و اگر میگذاشتند حج بی محتوا بود. حجی که یک مجمع عمومی است برای مسلمین و همه مسلمین در اونجا گرفتاری های ایام سالشون را باید حل بکنند و باید همه دور هم بشینند و دانشمندان اونها، عقلای اونها دور هم بشینند و مسائل اسلامی را ترک کنند و گرفتاری هایی که در هر کشور هست که از دست حکومت ها این گرفتاری ها بوده است یا از دست قدرت های بزرگ بوده است خاطر نشان کنند و در راه حلش فکر کنند، نقشه بکشند، حج را به یک صورت بی محتوا و مبتذل بیرون آوردند و امروز هم که یک طایفه از مسلمین از ایران و غیر ایران در فکر این هستند که در اون مجمع عمومی مسائل اسلامی، گرفتاری مسلمین، مسائل اجتماعی، مسائل دیگری که گرفتارند مسلمین، مسائلی که قدرت‌های بزرگ برای اونها پیش آوردند و گرفتاری‌هایی که حکومت‌ها برای اونها پیش آوردند در اونجا حل و فصل بشد، مع ذالک به یک صورت مبتذلی در آورده بودند و به مردم هم باورانده بودند به اینکه غیر از این چیزی نیست. امروز هم بعضی از آخوندهای درباری ایران را تکفیر می کند و مسلمین ایران را مسلم نمی داند برای اینکه اونها با آمریکا مخالفند و چه جرمی بالاتر از این و چه چیزی که انسان را از اسلام بیرون ببرد بالاتر از این که به آمریکا و اسرائیل کسی جسارت کند. این گرفتاری های شما مسلمان هاست و این ائمه جمعه هستند که در بلاد باید این مسائل را به مسلمین بفهمانند و گمان نکنند که اگر اینها در مجمع عمومی مسلمین این مسائل را طرح بکنند حکومت‌های اونها دیگر بتواند به اونها آزاری بدهد.
In 1980, there was a Hajj conference held in Toronto. Seeing as I was not around at that time, Brother Ali and Sister Layla Hasib were kind enough to compile highlights from that conference. May Allah reward them for their efforts. I will be reading out some of the highlights compiled by them, inshallah. Point number 1. Focusing on Jihad al-Asghar plus Jihad al-Akbar at the same time because they are not separate. Understanding and practicing the truth that Sunnis and Shias are together as equal Muslim sisters and brothers. Realizing that belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and standing with and for the Mustazafin are the crux and catalyst for peace, justice, and love on earth. Learning about Prophet Muhammad, his life, actions, hadith, etc., and his role in being the final messenger in a long line of prophets, and finalizing and completing Islam as the ordained way of life from the beginning to the end of time. Understanding Shaitan's promise and traps and identifying the followers of Shaitan, the Yazid, in the past, present, and future, and standing against them. For example, the House of Saud. Recognizing that enjoining the right and forbidding the wrong is our duty in the absence of the 12th Imam alayhi salam. Meeting Muslims from different places to establish and maintain friendships and to possibly find a like-hearted minded spouse, inshallah. Top-class lectures, questions, and answer periods from ulama, scholars, activists, writers, and everyday people from around the world. Learning about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Prophet Muhammad, the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, and the lovers of Allah, helping us to love them more and follow their ways. Analysis of the Imam's Hajj message. Analysis of the Quranic obligations of declaring Bara min al-Mushrikeen, Quran 9:3, at the time of Hajj. Understanding the political aspects of Hajj. Feeling empowerment and thankfulness in following Imam Khomeini's line, may Allah grant him the highest place in paradise. Discussing the long-standing and apartheid systems of Zionism and its deadly plots in Palestine and around the world. Identifying and recognizing the Islamic movement's activities and successes around the world and supporting it. Understanding the mission of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and how it applies to us. Highlighting resistance as a route for all people seeking their freedom. Completely recognizing, believing, and behaving on the truth that racism and nationalism will not free Muslims from oppression. Current events and past history from people in the places where they're happening. Practical advice and steps to assist with daily living, family relationships, fight issues, etc., fiqh issues, etc. Discussions about goals and the way forward. Networking and feeling the power of Islam. Next up, we will have a speech by Imam Abdul Alim Musa. He was born as a Clarence Realms in 1945. Abdul Alim Musa is an African-American Muslim Imam and the director of Masjid al-Islam of Washington, D.C. He is an activist and founder and director of As-Sabiyun movement and the Islamic Institute of Counter-Zionist American Psychological Warfare. He is a strong critic of U.S. politics and its support for the Zionist regime. Imam Abdul Alim Musa has served as a well-known public speaker across the world and has visited Qom on several occasions to deliver speeches on Islamic unity, oppression, and oppressions of African Americans, and his experience as a convert Muslim, as well as to attend Islamic unity conferences held in Tehran. Please welcome Imam Abdul Alim Musa with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Ahmaduhu wa asta'inuhu wa astadihi wa astaghfiruhu wa umminu bihi jalla wa la akfuruhu wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. As-salahu bil huda wa din al-haq liyadhhiruhu ala din kulihi walau kari al mushrikun. It's a great honor, it's a great privilege to be here celebrating the Hajj Conference. We participated in almost every Hajj conference in the past. The first major talk that I gave at Hajj Conference in Canada, in Toronto, was probably around 1984. Many of the great ulama was there. Ayatollah Mahdavikani, Ayatollah Zanjani, Ayatollah Jannati. All of those, it was Dr. Kaleem Siddiqui. For us, that was a great annual event. As Brother Mekki said before, when he was a kid, of course, I was already grown, as you can see. And so it was a great event that we had on a yearly basis. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Baratun min Allahi wa rasulihi illa alladina ahadtum min al-mushrikeen. The title of those was Barat al-Mushrikeen. You know, Surah 9 has Surah Tawbah, but it's also called Surah Barat, Barat al-Mushrikeen. The declaration of immunity from Allah and His Messenger to those of the pagans with whom you have contracted a mutual alliance. But it goes on to say, an announcement from Allah and His Messenger to the people assembled on the day of the great pilgrimage. I'd like to mention that this Risala, this part of Quran, was received after the Muslims had started and went to Hajj. Abu Bakr was the leader of the Hajj. Then the Prophet ﷺ received this revelation, and he sent Imam Ali to deliver this at the Hajjul Akbar, or as it says, an announcement from Allah and His Messenger to the people. He wanted a family member to deliver this, because this is to the Hajjul Akbar. This is the big Hajj. On the day of the great pilgrimage, that Allah and His Messenger dissolved treaties of obligations with the pagans. If then ye repent, it were best for you. But if you turn away, know ye that ye cannot frustrate Allah and proclaim a grievous penalty to those who reject faith. I want to read the ayat that comes after that, and I want to explain something that's been going on or for decades now. But the treaties are not dissolved with those pagans with whom you have entered into alliance, and who have not subsequently failed you in aught, nor aided anyone against you. So fulfill your engagements with them to the end of their term, for Allah loveth the righteous. We relate this directly to Syria. Now you got to remember the days. This is back in the 80s. Everybody was blaming the Islamic Republic for having a relationship with Syria, because they was at war with Iraq. But Syria was almost exactly like Iraq. They were both Ba'ath governments, right? In fact, you could have took Hafiz Assad in those days, right, and put him in Iraq, and you could have took Saddam Hussein and put him in Syria, because they were both Ba'athists. Now, they say, of course, Syria is mostly a so-called Sunni country, but the leaders were Alawiyan. Okay, there's many Christians there and what have you. And so this last ayat justifies the relationship Iran had with Syria then and now. Why? Because Syria was the only country in those days, the only Arab country that did not fight with the rest of the Arab countries. Egyptian pilots, Egyptian technicians, Jordanian regulars, right? Money from Saudi Arabia, all kind of technicians from all over the Arab world was fighting with Saddam against Iran. Syria was the only one. And as far as I know, we might be the only ones that have pulled this ayat from those days, and we related it even in those days, so people would understand this Barat al-Mushrikeen, the disavowal or immunity to those who had treaties with the Muslims, right? But now, however you want to classify Syria, it will fall under some of these categories. But the treaties are not dissolved with those pagans. So if you want to call Hafiz Assad and Alawi and pagans, multi-theist, or whatever you want to call them, right? Here's what the treaty says. The declaration says. You have entered into alliance and who have not subsequently failed you in aught, nor aided anyone else against you. They haven't fought against you. They haven't joined anyone who's fighting against you. So fulfill your engagements with them to the end of their term, for Allah loveth the righteous. So this is clarifying for those days certain issues. Now, I want to go a little farther. Today, there's something called what we call strategic alliance. Strategic alliance relates to Iran, Iraq, Syria, and even now we have Yemen, and we even have Russia. In those days, Russia was the big evil Reds, the big evil commies, remember? Okay, so now, but you see in Syria, after Russia saw what happened in Libya, one of their allies, right? They said, hold it, we're not gonna have that. And then that's when they began to join in 2015 or so, bombing the people, the Daesh and all that, who America had been bombing 2 years, and not one bomb landed anywhere near them, right? Because they were U.S. allies. The point today is this strategic alliance. Today, the Islamic Republic is not by itself. Iran is not alone anymore, you see. Now there's a whole, the revolution itself, the victory of the revolution has fulfilled basically all the obligations at those times. We used to talk about the survival of the Islamic Republic. I remember in '83 or something when we had the third or fourth anniversary of the revolution in Iran. We were so happy that this revolution had survived 3 or 4 years. Unbelievable. So it survived. The next thing was that if the revolution could be exported around the world, okay, if you look at the strategic alliance, if you look at what has happened since then with Iraq, what's happening with even in Qatif and the eastern provinces of Saudi Arabia, what's happening in Bahrain, what's happening all over the Muslim world, and what's happening with the Houthis in Yemen. Can you imagine that they have survived over 5 years with the wealthiest Arab country in the world fighting the poorest, and they still rolling along? So the export of the revolution is on a roll, a model. Yesterday, they had the American jet, F-15 or something, flying up next to a flight to Lebanon. What does that mean? That means, this Magbag America, death to America. America is dead. America is having a meltdown right now. America is having a global, so death to America, that was one of the things. Magbag America, look at America then and look at America now. America is having a meltdown a public meltdown. They're flying around. They're attacking. I mean, it's unbelievable that a military jet is so-called associates itself with, we're going to have an inspection. Now, don't forget, 290 Iranians were shot down by the Vincennes in the Gulf. 290 men, women, and children died. The Vincennes American warship shot them down. So you can imagine how Iranians and Lebanese would feel today. Can you imagine? With these people coming to do their danger. I'm going to try to speed up a little bit. So what we have now, the best way I can put it is, this is Walayat Faqih is a protection for a global protection against global fitna. That's what they told me it said. I can't read Farsi, but I can read the Arabic part. Anyway, so the other thing is, this was delivered at the University of Tehran a few years ago, and then they thought it was important, so they put it in the newspaper. Why did they put it in the newspaper? They put it in the newspaper because this is outlined to talk about unity. That was the purpose of Hajj. But now we're talking about a close unity. Walayat Faqih is a safeguard. It's a protection against global fitna. And there's a lot of people now who's not that in love with Walayat Faqih. But you have to look at the world. Afghanis have been fighting now over 40 years, and they're not cowards. So what's the problem? They don't have Walayat Faqih. Pakistan, right? Right next door, they don't have Walayat Faqih. Iraq has went through one transition after another, although they may be at least 65 or 70% Shias, without Walayat Faqih as a monitor, to give direction, to give solidarity, right? Walayat Faqih submits only to Islam, not to cliques. We have been against cliques all the time. Why? Because cliques it's like Democrats and Republicans, right? So we have cliques in amongst the Muslims. We have liberals, we have principalists. We can't afford that right now. That's what this article talks about. We cannot afford, with the whole world beaming down on us, right, trying to destroy Islam, we cannot afford to put cliquism, our personal group, above what's good for Islam. And now we have to say something very clearly. When you look around the world, right, Allah has handed the lovers of Ahlul Bayt the ball to carry during this generation of Islam. That's just the way it is, right? That means you have to be above all internally, above all divisionary, against all types of separation, right? So what will settle that? The concept of Walayat Faqih, right? Walayat Faqih keeps us focused, keeps us disciplined, keeps us keeping Islam in balance, the mizan, right, in the right direction. What does it do? If I was talking to some of my old friends, you know what I'd tell them to do? I would tell Javad Zarif right now, you go give Ahmadinejad a big hug. Why would I say that? Because to make sure that no one puts their group, right? This is just too good. We could mention many names. But I would say, you go and give right now Ahmadinejad a big hug, because you can't afford, right, any variances. That's why in the beginning, during the early years of the revolution, we didn't have too many cliques. It was Khat al-Imam, the line of Imam Khomeini. If y'all remember that, I guess y'all kind of young, so you may not. The line of Imam, right? And so we all had our personal views. After any revolution, there's going to be some differences in opinion. Whether we should have a strong economy, whether we should have laissez-faire, right? How we're going to treat these people or that people, this is automatic. But during this period of time, we have to put Islam first. Islam has to be first. That's the purpose of Walayat Faqih. He can't be in a clique. He has to keep Islam number one. He has to keep it first. Okay, that is the whole purpose of Walayat Faqih, to keep the whole ummah headed in the same direction. Now, again, we believe, as we can see around the world, the ball has been handed to Ahlul Bayt. That's just the way it is. Therefore, you have to have a higher stage. Brother talked about evolution. Here's what evolution means. Evolution, you don't want to be equine types in evolution. For instance, equine have evolved. They continue to evolve. But the world, the evolution of the world and the Islamic movement was moving at 100 miles an hour. The evolution of the Islamic movement was at 100 miles an hour. Equine was evolving, but at 40 miles an hour behind the curve. They wasn't evolving enough to keep up. Therefore, the mistakes they made in Egypt, we won't go into it, but we said right here, there will be no Arab Spring. There is no Arab Spring. And anybody bites off a piece of it, they're going to get bit real hard. That's what happened. The Islamic Republic is acting in behalf of the Muslim Ummah worldwide. Therefore, the ethics, the akhlaq, has to be at the highest level. No doubt about it. It has to be above cliquism and groupism. We don't have to worry about as much Magbag Amrika as we do about ourselves. I want you to look at the world just right now. Just in case you can't look out the window to see it, but just think. Look what's done happened. Big bad America, they have a crackpot as their leader, just at the wrong time. He's picked on China, right? Look at it. And China's on a roll. He didn't pick on China. Yeah, we're going to do this. He didn't pick on Russia, right? So Russia and Iran has a relationship. Russia, China, and Iran have their individual relationships and their collective relationship. They're talking about individual currency, world currency. I'm telling you, this is the day. But like we told people at the Hajj Conference in San Francisco, since Allah is handing you the ball, you have to look out and make sure that you safeguard the interests of the Muslims, of the Ummah, that you act and you carry yourself in a special way to safeguard the interests of the Ummah, and that you are not doing anything that makes the people that give you their allegiance and their support, but they want you to support them and stick with them and make sure their family and their friend, everybody is safe, right? Under that concept of Walayat Faqih. Okay. So the revolution has been successful. I want to read one more ayat before I leave, and that will, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu lakitum fiyatan fathbutu wadkurullaha kathiran la'alakum tuflihun wa atiullah wa rasulah la tanazzahu fatafshalu wa tadhhaba rihukum wasbiru innallaha ma'as sabirin. And we'll close with this. O you who believe, when you meet a force, be firm. Thabata. Thabata is firmness, discipline that you tight together. So it's saying, oh, you believe, when you meet a force, be firm. Atiullah, call on Allah, or follow Allah. Call on Allah in remembrance that you may reach falah, success. Tafsilu. Wa atiullah wa rasulahu wa la tanazzahu. And fall into no disputes. Do not fall into any disputes. You have differences, but you set aside your personal preference for now, because homeboy is out there with all his guns pointing at you, and he's shooting at you every day, all day. And he gave his Zionists extra help. Him and the triangle of terror, the United States, Saudi Arabia, and the Zionist state, the triangle of terror. Don't all our problems come from them? That's the source. Okay, so Atiullah wa rasulihi, obey Allah and obey the messenger, and fall into no disputes. Fatafshalu wa tadhhaba rihukum. Ri is wind. What this means, least you lose heart and your power depart. What it means is, if you fall into disputes and arguments, the wind will go out of your sails. Your power will dissipate, right? Because of the disputes, because of the argumentations, because of the pro or negative walayati faqih, all of those things will dissipate, will go away. Your strength will go away. But then it says, be patient and persevering. Sabr means to check, to tie, and to contain, right? That's what it means, right? Sabr is a protection against as our brother was saying before, against wayward nafs and desires and all these floaty things that can come in your mind and destroy your vision and your hope and your focus. So be patient. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with those who persevere. In closing, we would like to just say that we open with Barat al-Mushrikeen. That means we disavow all of our attachments to this world, to these people, to all of what they are involved in. Except those who believe, right? Those who have not joined any other group, movement, or organization to fight against us, right? And then that we come together with firmness and discipline and self-control, and we enhance our unity by that self-control, by that thabata, by sticking together. And we don't let anybody come amongst us and pay us any money or blow wind in our ear or divert us from the focus of pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The last thing I want to mention is ethics. Sometime when people look, I know you might have thought I was going to talk about something, but the Islamic Republic is leading this whole charge. We have to, one of my greatest pictures is this one right here. Now you can imagine when I come back into America with this picture, how how the Americans feel. Of course, I have with all the presidents. Technically, most of the ulama and leaders, since we've been around so long, are actually, friends of ours. So can you imagine? Everybody in America is afraid of America. This is how we feel about America. How to punk the FBI. They ain't nothing but a bunch of punks. I'm telling you, if we can talk this stuff inside of America, if Iran can hold on outside of America and Lebanon, if the Yemenis can fight tooth and nail with all of the Persian Gulf states and all the wealth of the Saudis trying to destroy them, right? If they can do that, what do we mind a little bit of fitna here in America? They're just a bunch of sissies. So what, right? That's our feeling right here in America. Do not let your location divert you from the support and love for Walayat Faqih. Don't let the wealth and the accumulation of your businesses and stuff divert you from the love of Walayat Faqih. Do not allow the system or the people to consume your mind and your heart and divert your nafs, where they go out and they turn right back to you, and in some way they hinder you or they destroy you. That's to America. America is dying. It's almost dead now. I mean, they're dying in the public. They're dying right before you could see every day. It's insanity. America has gone crazy. And at this time, and I'll close in a minute. I know my time is getting short, but can't get this microphone to nobody and you ain't got no way to turn it off. But anyway, I'm trying to tell you, right now, America is in a free fall. It's in a meltdown, right? And it's doing everything. If you talk about crisis management, the type of management that you should have when your system, your people, or your organization is in a crisis. There's a whole outline of things that you should do, right? Can you imagine? Look at Boss Man right now. He's doing everything wrong. I'm telling you. Dear believers, and now I'm going to really close, but we want to thank, because I notice the young people there, most of you are young, and it's my pleasure that you invited me, let's say a semi-senior citizen. I call myself a semi-senior citizen. I may be 75 and been around, the greatest experience is to be a part of Islam for all of these years. After the destruction of the Black movement back in the late 60s and early 70s, in our migration to true Islam, there's something called contentment that comes with this work. It is a great asset, and we thank Allah for that. We thank Allah for you young people who are inspired by everything that's happening now and are not turned around in hiding under the masjid somewhere. Thank you very much. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم.
Jazakallah Imam Abdul Ali Musa for your words on Wilayat Faqih and how it keeps the Ummah focused and in the right direction. Wilayat Faqih is for the betterment of Islam and not for any particular clique. We should not let anything divert us the system, or the people from the love of Wilayat Faqih. Next up, we will be watching a video clip from Ayatollah Khamenei about tranquility.
سکونت دل یکی از اون نعمت‌های بزرگ خداست. هو الذی انزل السکینة فی قلوب المؤمنین لیزدادوا ایمانا مع ایمانهم. سکینه یعنی آرامش. این آرامش همون چیزی است که اولیاء خدا داشتن. در سختی ها، در مشکلات فراوان روحشون آرامش داشته است، تلاطم نداشته است. این سکینه خیلی چیز مهمی است. در زندگی امام که نگاه میکنید، این ارتباط با خدا و اتصال با خدا در او یک سکینه و آرامشی به وجود می آورد. اونجایی که دیگران وحشت زده می شدند، او آرام بود.
محبت بفرمایید و بگید چه احساسی می‌کنید از برگشت به ایران؟
در وصیت‌نامه خود هم خطاب به مردم ایران، بلکه ملت‌های مسلمان، میگوید با دلی آرام و قلبی مطمئن از مردم خداحافظی می‌کند. آرامش دل به معنی بیخیالی نیست، به معنای بی‌دغدغه‌ای نیست، به معنای این است که دل تلاطم نداره. حج هم همینجور است، از دو جهت. حج هم از جهت ذکر و توجهی که در حج وجود دارد، هم از این جهت که ذکر الهی است که علی ذکر الله تطمئن القلوب. این به طور طبیعی یک آرامشی در روح انسان به وجود میاد، اون تلاطم ها از بین میره. وقتی انسان میره حج، اونجا میبینه این جمعیت مسلمان ها را از همه اقطار عالم آمدن، احساس میکنه که تنها نیست. این احساس عدم تنهایی یک آرامشی به قلب انسان میده. همه در کنار هم، رنگ‌های مختلف، پوست‌های مختلف، ملیت‌های مختلف، شناسنامه‌های مختلف، مذاهب مختلف، سلیقه‌های مختلف، همه در کنار هم، مثل هم. اینا جمع میشن اونجا، همه دور خانه خدا طواف میکنن، همه یک عمل رو انجام میدن. این یک آرامشی به انسان میبخشه. صفحه 296.
Next up, we have a spoken word video presentation by Brother Asif Raza. Brother Asif Raza is an Islamic activist, and he was a winner of spoken word competition during our last Imam Khomeini anniversary event. Asif Raza works in the power sector and is an elected leader in Canada's largest power sector union. He is a father of 2 young children. In his free time, he likes to read books on history and politics. He draws his inspiration for poetry from the works of Allama Iqbal. So without further ado, I would like to bring up his presentation, inshallah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Today's poem that I have, its topic is Hajj should break the idols of racism. In this you will notice there are some Quranic verse, Surah number 49, verse 13, Surah number 16, verse 120 and 121, and Surah Al-Fath, Surah 48, verse 1. Hajj should break the idols of racism. As we descend on the holy house from all corners and whereabouts, circling together along this divine axis, imitating the Ibrahimi practice. Ibrahim, the friend of God, is our reference, the father of monotheism, our reverence, the one who is ummah within himself, who had broken all the idols of the self. The nights are spent in worship together on Mount Arafah, the Mount Arafah, as the pilgrims gather like bees buzzing around from the sound of the recitation, pleading together for a transformation, running between the 2 hills, remembering the mother with a strong will, drinking from the fountain of paradise, praying that our Lord is satisfied, stoning the symbol of evil, the one who has caused all upheaval. In memory of the Father and Son, every temptation they had shunned. Here I am, O Lord, here I am. You indeed have no partner, here I am. No doubt all praise is yours. Absolute domain and power is yours. All dressed in simple and white, every color and every tribe, learning to be together united, and ummah never to be divided, reflecting on the sermon of the Prophet of Mercy, as we gather around on the Mount of Mercy, that Arab or not, black and white do not matter. Piety is the only yardstick that truly matters. He had only divided you into tribes so that you know each other without despise. The most noble of you in his sight is the righteous one, not your pride. If you descend on the holy land, but gather around different flags and bands, the water of Zamzam will have no effect. You can wash yourself till your heart's content. Hajj should break the idols of racism, otherwise these rituals are just tourism. Your actions are just in vain if you have nothing from it to gain. The ummah is Bilal and Salman. Ummah is Abu Dhar and Ammar. If your ummah has no shades, your present and future will fade. Hajj is to build an ummah together without any divide. In front of the Lord gather your hearts together as one, the blood of humanity as one. Ibrahim was ummah within himself, obedient to God and inclined towards the truth itself, who takes no leader other than the one. Embrace his sunnah and bow to none. Let's do a Ibrahimi Hajj once again with our Hajjers and Ismail once again, for once again we will make history. Verily, we have granted you a manifest victory. Verily, we have granted you a manifest victory. Hajj should break the idols of racism. Otherwise, these rituals are just tourism. Your actions are just in vain if you have nothing from it to gain. The Ummah is Bilal and Salman, Ummah is Abu Dhar and Ammar. If your Ummah has no such shades, your present and future will fade. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Thank you.
Due to technical issues, Imam Showardi will not be able to join us for the seminar, unfortunately. So we will conclude on this front. So to summarize today's events, we learned about the evolution of Malcolm X and his control on his nafs and his ability to learn new truths and evolve every day. This is something that we should all emulate in our lives. Our worst enemy is truly ourselves and our ego. We also learned about the whole purpose of Wilayat al-Faqih and how it keeps the Ummah focused and in the right direction. Wilayat al-Faqih is for the betterment of Islam and not for any particular clique. We heard many beautiful poetry from our youth about Hajj. May Allah reward the poets for their efforts, inshallah. We would like to thank all scholars, poets, and volunteers that have put this event together. Inshallah, we will all get a chance to complete our obligation of Hajj in the coming years. With that, we will conclude the program. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.